What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the 8th and final episode of our season finale series of my Studs and Duds NFL Player Reviews series. Sorry for the late upload here on a Sunday night. It was a goal of mine to get this series done, out there and finished before all of the bullets start flying with NFL free agency. Well, even before I sat down to record this, we saw a Devontae Adams trade. We saw a Geno Smith trade. The moves have already been flying, but I'm happy to get this series done before the legal tampering period officially begins tomorrow. I do want to remind you guys, I will be live here on the channel not long from when you're watching this video, or maybe even you're watching this after my upcoming live stream reacting to free agency. We'll be live at 12:30 Eastern tomorrow. We've already got, again, plenty of moves to talk about, so it's going to be a very fun show. And if you miss it, I'm going to upload it, the whole audio version of the stream, to the Fully Inflated Football podcast. But without further ado, let's get started. Finish up this Studs and Duds series with the AFC West. Our first team is going to be the Denver Broncos, and for their super stud, I've got to talk about Bo Nix. What a rookie season Bo had. Kind of showing a lot of the haters out there, man. Bo Nix has been one of those QBs that got a lot of hate in the draft process, and even earlier in the season, when it took him a few weeks to kind of get settled in the NFL, but really locked in and frankly looked like, you know, he's young. He'll still hopefully get better, but in theory looked like the upside of a rookie Bo Nix, being what his tape was at Oregon, as someone that takes tremendous care of the football, plays on time, within structure, is not going to miss open reads, throws with accuracy, can make better, deeper throws than he gets credit for, and then can improvise as well, make some throws on the run, but pick up first downs with his legs as well. I think really from like week 4 onward, because the first 3 weeks, especially that Seattle game week 1, it was not looking great, but just a credit to him for not letting that get to him, for having the confidence in himself. And I think that speaks to these quarterbacks like Bo Nix that have battled through adversity, that have failed before. They can look themselves in the mirror and stay headstrong. And I think he deserves the absolute most credit for all of that. Just some stats on Bo Nix here, as he gets a 5 ratings bump here from a 73 to a 78. That's a +7 on the season. But just some fun stats on Bo Nix. From the second half of the season, he finishes 11th out of 25 quarterbacks, by the way, were eligible for the second half of the season. So 11th in big time throw percentage, 7th in turnover worthy play percentage. Again, just taking tremendous care of the football. 4th in QB rating, 13th in yards per attempt. That one stands out to me because everybody calls him, not everybody, but a lot of his haters call him this check down artist. But he showed he can push the ball downfield, get efficient yards per attempt. So 13th there. 7th in PFF passing grade, for whatever stock you want to put in that. 7th is certainly impressive for him for the second half of the season. And he finishes the season with 3,900 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. That's a great season, man. I would like to think that's probably pretty close to where... Let's actually pull this up. I think that's pretty close to, like, there was that graphic going around that showed Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers having like the same stats. I just want to look at this. So yeah, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, and Bo Nix are all like right there next to each other, right about 3,800 yards or so, about 20. Bo Nix actually had the most regular season touchdowns. So Mahomes had 26 touchdowns, Rodgers 28, Bo Nix 29. Interceptions, you got Mahomes 11, Rodgers 11, Bo Nix 12. I might have to just throw up a little graphic for the video, folks, so you can track those stats pretty well. But that's pretty good territory, obviously, to be there with Mahomes in this division and Rodgers. I'm not saying he's as good as Mahomes, but just some fun stats. He really did have a good rookie season. So definitely our super stud, Bo Nix, should be pretty excited if you're a Broncos fans, feeling like, you've got a quarterback that can at least, get the job done here, at least be one of those tier 3 guys that you can win a Super Bowl with if they can build up this roster in a good way. And hopefully with a lot of the players changing in the rest of this discussion, they're getting there. I really do think they are. But There is one player that we're going to start off with. We kind of go positionally here. So we're actually going to start on a negative note, and then that's the only player we're lowering here for the Broncos. But it is Javonte Williams, who just, I don't know that he has it anymore after all of the injuries. Really just a non-factor of a season, was essentially benched as the season went on. He's still going to be sitting there at a 76 rating after going down 3 here, which is just out of a respect to kind of what he did earlier in his career. Maybe he can get back healthy, but definitely a rating that, we'll kind of see earlier in the year where he's sitting. He's going to hit the market. Denver's not going to bring him back. If he's sitting there as an RB3 for someone and he gets a few touches and just doesn't look like he has it, we might have to tank that 76 even more. But yeah, man, just 3.7 yards per attempt. What stands out to me is 23 missed tackles forced on 146 attempts. Compare that to his rookie season and coming out of college, where that was the elite trait of Javonte Williams, was contact balance, forcing defenders to miss their tackles. He had 63 missed tackles forced on 203 attempts. So that has literally dropped in half. It was 31% in his rookie season, and it's still been relatively okay the last couple of years. And last year he did have 774 yards. So, he wasn't truly terrible last year, just not great. But again, 31% his rookie season on missed tackle forced percentage, and 15.5% missed tackle forced this season. That's very, very low, especially for a bigger back, known for his contact balance. So, unfortunately, a negative note on Javonte Williams, but let's get positive here. Marvin Mims, their year 2, second-round wide receiver out of Oklahoma, showing the Broncos why they drafted him. Some really exciting plays down the stretch. Showing off on some plays the incredible explosive vertical ability that he does have. He's got good speed, not great speed, but he is an instinctive guy to track the deep ball and be a vertical threat. And he only saw 10 targets of 20-plus yards, and he only came down with 3 of them, so we're still getting there. But on those 3 receptions, 169 yards, 3 touchdowns, a PFF receiving grade on vertical targets of 97.7. So showing that those flashes can lead to production in the league. But I think what stands out maybe even more so with Marvin Mims is just how good he was in the run after catch game. So he ends up with 29 catches behind the line of scrimmage this year, which is obviously easy production in Sean Payton's offense, but making the absolute most of those, quick schemed up targets with a 12.8 yards after the catch on those, again, behind the line of scrimmage targets. So showing some of the shiftiness and putting that incredible acceleration that he has to use. So, he's still really not there in terms of being more of an intermediate threat. If he could develop more of a, profile to run digs and back shoulders and stop routes, you could really put the whole picture together and threaten to all 3 levels of the field. I think he did some good stuff in the short game, but definitely enough flashes to feel like he's going to be one of your starters next year. Whether he's your number 2 or your number 3, that will be left for the offseason to decide, but definitely exciting signs now in year 2 from Mims. And then Devon Vele has had just a nice rookie season. Obviously, Sean Payton kind of pegged this guy right away as that sort of big slot role in this offense. He's kind of always had this guy, whether it was Jimmy Graham or Jawan Johnson, Marquise Colston, oh my gosh, Michael Thomas did a lot of that stuff too, but Vele is not this crazy athlete. He even had some drop issues, but he does catch 60% of his contested catch targets. That's 9 for 15 this year. Ends up with 475 yards. He's definitely a piece that they like in that role. I do think they could look to upgrade that if they want to go pay a Jawan Johnson or something like that, but they've got a guy that can at least do it at a solid level for them. So a +2 for Vele. That's a +5 on the season for the 7th round pick out of Utah. But really the highlight, I think, for the Broncos on this season are their lines, offensive and defensive lines. Denver has really emerged as one of the best, maybe 3 to 5 teams in the league in terms of trench play, combining the rankings of their offensive line and defensive line. So we've got a lot of praise for that group, and it's a lot of underrated players that this series can really shine to highlight some of these guys. maybe not so underrated being our first two guys we're going to talk about here. Garrett Bowles just had an incredible season yet again. I think he just is one of the best left tackles in football and deserved a little bit of love there, being rated at an 85. So he gets a +1 up to an 86. But Quinn Miners definitely was a candidate for super stud for me for Denver, but I wanted to highlight Bo Nix. But you guys know that if you've been around the channel, you know I love Quinn Miners. Just a really special athlete coming out of UW Whitewater. And of course, there was going to be a bit of a transition for him getting used to the pro game, but his year-to-year growth has been nonstop. And now in the 4th year of his deal has been paid, now making a case to be, I think, the best guard in football, certified by the fact that he was voted first team All-Pro. Now, at an 84 rating, I don't think he's quite there yet. I think to be, tagged the best guard in football, in my opinion, I want to see at least 2 years of that elite performance, but it really was an incredible year for Quinn Miners. He finishes first in pass blocking efficiency, allows just 12 pressures on the season. That's insane. And then on top of that, finishes second in PFF run block grade, showing off his athleticism and just, I think he's gotten stronger and better and more consistent as a run blocker on tape. Just an absolute star. And Denver was just to say they were smart to draft him in the 3rd round is an understatement, I would say. A lot of teams were really quite stupid to not take him before that. But it's not just those bigger name guys. Their center, Luke Wattenberg, year 3, 5th round pick out of Washington in just an absolute breakout season. What a find he's been for Denver. So he finishes the season second in pass blocking efficiency among offensive centers behind Creed Humphrey. That pass blocking efficiency is the amount of pressures you allow per snap. So just locking people down. A PFF pass blocking grade of 82.5. And what's most notable there as well, if you pull up his profile, from week 3 on, it is all green and blue. He didn't have one bad game other than week 1 and week 2, where he allowed 4 out of his 9 pressures on the entire season in those first 2 weeks against Pittsburgh in Seattle. Now, he's a lighter guy. I see him listed at 6'5", 300. His run blocking, not quite there, not quite the play strength, but in terms of just the steady feet, staying in front of guys, not letting people through his lane, they found a guy at center, and this is probably just the beginning. He will be heading into a contract year next season. And just a remarkable year. He frankly could have been a super stud candidate because it's not too often you get year 3, 5th round centers emerging as one of the best pass protecting centers in football. Then we will flip over to the defense. Again, like I said, this line play is really good, and we've got some players on their defensive line going up. John Franklin Myers. Man, Denver really did do a good job kind of stealing value since Sean Payton has gotten here, and they're starting to see the fruits of that labor. They get John Franklin Myers from the Jets, and the Jets clearly missed his presence, and he comes in with 53 pressures, 8 sacks. He finishes 8th in the NFL in pass rush win rate for interior defensive players, and he's just a chaos machine. He's a better athlete than most guards are used to going against, but he plays with incredible leverage. He's got a variety of rush moves. He's got power. Just a really nice player. +2 for John Franklin Myers. Into the 80s for his rating now, up to an 81. And then his running mate, Zach Allen, +2 up to an 82. He is looking for a big payday, and he's a fascinating one. And not interesting in the sense of like, is he really that good, or should you pay him, or anything like that? Like, he is obviously a really good player, a huge impact on this defense, and Denver absolutely should retain him. But interesting in the sense of the fact that he was the most productive interior defensive lineman in football. And as we know, these agents and these contract negotiations, they love to bring those numbers to the table. And for Zach Allen, he led all interior defensive linemen in pressures and sacks. So I find it interesting to think, does he have the leverage to come to the table and be like, I need something like close-ish to the Chris Jones deal? Like, is he really going to get $28-29 million? Probably not. That, I think, is probably beyond what NFL teams think of him. And the reason for that, and you see that 82 rating compared to the production, you might say that's too low. Well, the reason he's able to lead the league in pressures and sacks is he is a good player, but he also plays a bazillion snaps. And that's not even really trying to take anything away from him, because I think that's a good thing too that could be brought to the table in contract negotiations, is he is the only player in football, interior defensive player in football, that played over 900 snaps. He played 964 snaps. The next guy down was Osa Odigizua, who played 859. There were only 5 other players that played 800 snaps. Then you're down to 780, which is 200 snaps less than Zach Allen played, which was Chris Jones. And that's like 3 extra games of snaps that you're getting out of Zach Allen, and he's still a good player on top of that. So that's fascinating to me. How much does that weigh into the contract negotiations? But you also can look at the pass rush win rate. You know, he can beat one-on-one reps for sure, but he was 38th in the NFL in pass rush win rate. And he's not, I would say, a dominant run defender. He can make splash plays. He uses his quickness to get off blocks, but he is a guy that converted from edge and is now playing 3-tech full time. So he's not this dominant run defender either. So his market's just going to be very fascinating. His last deal, he got about $15 million. He wants a contract. That's kind of why I'm bringing this up. I think about 20 a year for Zach Allen feels about right for the type of player he is, but either way deserves his love. And like I said, the Broncos defensive line is very underrated, and he's the best player right now on that defensive line. So that's a pretty big compliment, I think. But probably the other biggest candidate for this team's super stud is our next player here, Nick Bonitto. Year 3 was a good one for Bonitto, and we saw the flashes last year, 47 pressures, 9 sacks, but this year, dude, taking things to the next level, and especially in the second half of this season, just really figuring things out, man. You talk about this Broncos defense being one of the better defenses in the league this year, and getting someone off the edge that can really just dissect one-on-one reps and end third downs by getting after the quarterback. Nick Bonitto proved to be that guy this year. Just in the second half of the season, so since week 9, weeks 10 onward, he finishes with 37 pressures, 8 sacks, and was 6th in the NFL in pass rush win rate in that time. Things really clicked for him, and he was even playing his best ball late into this season. He had a great game against Buffalo. He was a real problem. Had Josh Allen running for, I don't want to say running for his life, but running all over the place in that game. He ends up with 4 pressures in that one. And now it's kind of go time. He heads into year 4, contract year, as a second-round pick. And he's going to be one of those, like, superstar watch breakout types of players. He was always going to be a guy that was going to take a little bit of time, because he was just so raw coming out of Oklahoma. My pro comp for him coming out was a literal bolt of lightning, in the sense that his get off, his bend, it's just different. There's maybe 3 or 4 players in the league, if that can move the way that he does. And the names that you would mention in that conversation are guys like Micah Parsons. Now, Parsons does it a little bit bigger with more power. That's why he's Micah Parsons. But, Abdul Carter coming into the league. Like, that's the type of twitch and athleticism that Bonitto has. And the fact that he's starting to figure out how to stem moves together, threaten with the outside, but then bring an inside counter to the table and have that recognition for which techniques linemen are using, and really just starting to put a plan together for how to win throughout the course of the game. Again, it is go time. Nick Bonitto, a 78 rating for now, plus 5 from what he did on the second half of the season. He finishes the year with 61 pressures, 13.5 sacks. Like, we're really starting to cook with gas, and I'm really excited to see what year 3 brings for him. And I'm also interested to see how Denver plays this, because if you project this type of development for a guy with these traits, you might want to lock him up now if he's willing to do that. Or does he just bet on himself and go have a monster season and go get $28 million next year? Really a fun player. But we got some more players on the defense. Cody Barton, the linebacker, had a really nice season. He was bad last year in Washington. There's a reason he was available for nothing in Denver, but he took that to heart and really kind of figured things out. He's kind of next in line of these many second, third round linebackers that have the athletic profile, but take 5-6 years to figure things out in this league. And I think from a run defense perspective, he was awesome, man. He finishes with 34 defensive stops. As a tackler, just hyper consistent. One of the most consistent tacklers in football, missing just 4.9% of his 117 total tackles, just missing 6 out of those attempts. Like, that's wild consistency. Ends up with a couple interceptions, a couple pass breakups. He had signed just a 1-year deal here in Denver. I believe he's set to hit the market here. I don't think they've locked him up. Will be an interesting name to follow because his tape was pretty damn good. We'll see if the league caught on to that and if he's got a big market, or if Denver can kind of get him back, because I don't think they want to lose him, most likely. I mean, just with how he played. So going to be an interesting player to follow for sure. But then, of course, Pat Surtain wins Defensive Player of the Year. He's now my highest rated corner. I've got him above Sauce, Broncos fans. Sauce had a down year, and Pat Surtain absolutely did not, obviously. And I think with Surtain, the biggest thing you can say about him is just how much of a steady hand he is. You know, Denver does like to blitz a lot, and they like to play a lot of top-down coverage. So in terms of like reception percentage allowed, you're going to look at that, and Pat Surtain was actually towards the top of the league, but that's like all scheme. He allowed 73% of the receptions when targeted, but that's because they're basically only targeting him in those situations. And his ability to limit explosive situations playing that style coverage is remarkable. You go down the board, only twice all season did he allow a reception of more than 20 yards. And most weeks you're talking about 6 yards, 9 yards, or not allowing any receptions at all. But a big reason for that is his consistency as a tackler. So he's in the right spot. He comes downhill. And he didn't miss a single tackle this season, a 0% missed tackle percentage. Now, I know these aren't the most exciting ways to describe Pat Surtain, but when you look at the scheme they play, this is really important. If you're going to play that top-down style, you need that corner to make that tackle. Otherwise, there's going to be a ton of space, and it defeats the whole purpose of playing top-down coverage. And to not miss a single tackle all season, it's just absurd. But beyond that, 5 pass breakups, 4 interceptions. If you were targeting him, you mostly weren't going to have a whole lot of luck. So it's not a hot take to say that Pat Surtain is amazing. And heading into the year, I had Sauce 1 and Surtain 2 kind of in a tier of their own. I guess I'd flip that now. And maybe we've got the opportunity for someone like Derek Stingley to get into that conversation if he can repeat what he does next year. But a lot of praise there. And then Brandon Jones, I was just so wrong about this signing, man. And I didn't like what he did in Miami at all. They signed him to a 3-year, $20 million deal. And talk about just maximizing on value. But Brandon Jones had a career year, to say the least. He emerged as a really nice starter for Denver, and now he's just a huge discount. But he was a steady hand in run support. That was something he always did well in Miami, but the coverage stuff was never really there. And this year, he gets 6 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, just something really clicked for him in this system, in Joseph's defense. And he's locked and loaded as a starter, and he himself is going to have some leverage to say, hey, maybe I'll play on the second year of this deal, but let's get some more money on this contract before year 3. And then Will Lutz had a really good year as the kicker here for Denver. He makes all of his PATs, all 47, and was 31 of 35 on field goals this year, and 3 of those 4 misses were on 50-plus yard attempts. So he's up to a 79 rating. Okay, there are your Denver Broncos. Let's go to the Los Angeles Chargers next up. And as we begin with their super stud, going Ladd McConkey, getting another +5 ratings boost, is 78 to an 83, a highly respectable ranking for a rookie wide receiver heading into year 2. He finishes this season, including what was a tremendous showing in their playoff loss against the Texans, probably his best game of the season, where he puts up 9 catches for 197 yards and a touchdown, and reminding everybody that he's not just this prototype white slot wide receiver. He can actually get deep down the field and take the top off the defense. That was something that was really special about him. He has awesome speed to threaten in that area of the field, and he showed it off in that game. Can I interest you in an 86-yard reception, which he had in that game? But what was maybe the most surprising about Ladd McConkey, because frankly, there weren't a ton of things that were that surprising. It was just, if he stayed healthy, this guy was going to be hyper productive. As a rookie, getting to be the number 1 target for Justin Herbert, it was just such a great landing spot. Someone that I comped his skill set to Keenan Allen in the sense of how you can use him as primary slot guy that can play a little bit outside. But what was most impressive about him was the 62.5% contested catch win rate. 15 for 24 on contested catches. A lot of that is these slot targets where he's getting popped after the catch and he's showing those firm hands to hold on to it. So he's just a complete player. But what a just blessing that the Chargers were able to get Ladd McConkey in the draft. They moved up to get him, which is good on them, but just laughable, absolutely laughable, and frankly disgraceful that the Patriots opted not to take this player and go for Jalen Polk, but the Chargers absolutely, capitalized on that. But I am going to give Quentin Johnston a little bit of love. I know it's like, it's kind of frowned upon to do that, because when he has his bad moments, they are extremely frustrating. And I completely understand that. Yet again, he finishes just 7 for 23 on contested catch looks, 30% contested catch win rate. After that was a huge problem for him last season. Also ends with 6 drops on the season, a 10% drop rate. I mean, this dude's ball skills are just ass. But he did make some plays. And it's 711 yards on the season, 55 receptions, 8 touchdowns. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Quentin Johnston has reached his upside or that he was worth the draft pick or anything like that, but it's all in context, right? We're talking about him going up 3 on the season, up to a 73 rating, and at least projecting as a potentially useful player for them. He did have week 18 an awesome game. He made some really tough catches down the sideline, showing that, like, those flashes of being that X-wide receiver that they were hoping he could be. It's just those flashes are constantly brought backwards by horrible performances, and how emblematic that week 18, he comes out with the game of his life, man. He has 13 catches for 186 yards. He goes 2 for 2 on contested catches. Looked like a breakout game for Quentin Johnston. And then the playoff game happens, and it's, the next week, probably the worst game of his season, at least. He goes 0 for 3 on those contested, trust throws from Justin Herbert, and has another drop on top of that. Like, just a brutal game. 0 receptions on 5 targets in that game. A frustrating player, but for where he was, he still deserves some boosts in his ratings for how he produced. But I think as a number 3 wide receiver and someone that does have athletic ability, he did force 13 missed tackles after the catch this season. You put him into the mix. Hopefully he can continue to work on those hands, hit those jugs machines, and you could end up with a useful player. Get something at least out of that former first-round pick. But we'll give Stone Smart some love next, a +3 ratings boost for him. He wasn't really able to kind of sustain that flash that he showed in the middle of the season. He had that awesome game against the Chiefs towards the end of the year, and then backed it up the next week against Tampa, and then just kind of stopped getting targeted. I don't know if he got banged up or what, but he is in that mold of these Greg Roman tight end 2 types, these undersized kind of mismatch problem types that can come in heavier packages. I don't think this is like the last we've seen of Stone Smart with him showing some flashes mid-season there. Definitely showed the ball skills and that he can be a guy that can run away from linebackers and safeties. So +3 for him. He only had 16 catches for 200 yards on the season. So I can't give him crazy love, but in those 2 games, he really did look like an impact player. So we'll see on that front. But on the offensive line, Joe Alt continuing to go up steadily as we kind of expected. I mean, I don't really have too much to say here. He wasn't perfect. I think that playoff game against the Texans, he showed that he's still got ways to go in terms of pass protection. I think the run blocking was pretty good, but like it's just going to be steady improvement for him. Just good to see that this isn't like an Evan Neal situation where kind of everybody thinks he's a blue chip prospect and then he just wasn't. Joe Alt absolutely hits in his rookie season. Up to a 79 rating as a rookie is very good, and I expect that to continue to climb as we keep doing this series in the future. I do just have some notes on the offense before we flip over to the defense on some other offensive linemen, being Jamari Sawyer and Trey Pipkins. So neither of these guys played well at guard, but that's because I think both of these guys are tackles. Jamari Sawyer, a left tackle that was asked to play right guard. In his rookie season, he showed he can play a left tackle. I still think he could potentially do that. The Chargers just don't need that. He to me is a guy, if I'm the Patriots or any of these teams, the Commanders, teams that need a left tackle, I would get on the phone and offer a 5th-round pick for Jamari Sawyer. Like, that's a better dart throw than you're going to get at the end of the draft, I think. So, something to keep an eye on there. Just for whatever reason, his play style just doesn't really translate inside. And then Trey Pipkins as well. They take Joe Alt and slide Pipkins inside to see if he can play guard. And he was all over the map. So, like, I would lower them, but they're not that highly rated to begin with, but I think they are probably just playing out of position. So I at least wanted to mention that in the sense of like why their ratings aren't changing, and also acknowledging like the Chargers have needs on the offensive line. We also didn't talk about Bradley Bozeman. He's set for free agency, and he can't hold up as a pass protector. So center and right guard, and even Zion Johnson just hasn't really broken out either. So interior offensive line definitely wasn't good for them, and I think some Chargers fans, with the way their season ended, getting just eaten on the interior of the offensive line, probably expected a bit of a conversation there. So there you go. But let's talk about the defense. A couple guys on this interior defensive line, a couple of one-year prove-it deal veterans that absolutely found hopefully a home with the Chargers, but certainly an opportunity to make themselves some money. Poona Ford especially had just a career year, especially as a run defender. Man, good for him. I've always liked Poona Ford, but when he went to Buffalo last year, I mean, Bills fans are watching this like, what the hell? Like, he was bad for us. And I don't think it's necessarily a scheme thing. I don't know. Maybe it is, but something just clicked with him back with the Chargers. He was a good run defender for the Seahawks, but man, he was everywhere for the Chargers. Just such a tough guy to block. He's 5'11", 310 pounds. Just imagine trying to like displace that player. He gets under your pad level, and then he's got great instincts to find the football. So they haven't been able to lock him up yet. I think they would be pretty devastated if they were to lose Poona Ford, but he's a guy at 29 years old with a career year. This is his chance to really play the market and cash out and kind of get his sort of generational wealth, if you will, as a guy that he's made really good money, arguably generational wealth as a 7-year NFL vet. I guess depending how you invest it, but really the opportunity to get that maybe $50 million contract, and it just takes it to another level. Go buy a yacht, if you will, that type of money. And with all the guys that have re-signed with their teams as of this recording, he's going to be maybe one of the higher paid free agency players left on the market. Should be fun to track him. And then Tyre Tart, this is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere for the Titans a couple of years ago as a really nice two-way defensive tackle, and then got into some off-field troubles. He was basically kicked off of Tennessee, and then he ended up in Houston for a little bit. I feel like there might have even been another team in there. But settling down here with the Chargers, I can't really speak to whether or not he's matured and is staying off the field. I just don't really have any information on that. But he was available for the Chargers this season. Ends up with some really impactful pass rushing snaps, 18 pressures on the season on just 218 snaps, and then played the run well. So 378 snaps for him. I think they probably want him back, again, as long as he's not like one of these off-field guys that, behind the scenes, they're just kind of a headache. It's hard to kind of speculate on that type of thing, but that's definitely why he was available and why he had to kind of earn playing time and all that stuff. But when he's on the field, he's a good player. So a plus 4, by the way, for Poona Ford. I'm trying to get better at reiterating the ratings changes as we go here, but a plus 4 for Poona Ford, 75 to a 79, and then Tyre Tart, 71 to a 74, getting a plus 3. I am going to lower Joey Bosa. Just, man, the efficiency, the run defense, the availability, it has just all fallen off the map. He is one of the bigger name free agents out there. He's not one of the better players out there in terms of free agency. He can still play when he is available. He's a good number 2 rusher. He's still I think he was 28th in pass rush win rate on true pass rush snaps. So if you get him in a situation where he can pin his ears back and get after the quarterback, he can still do it. He's not the top 10 pass rush win rate type of guy that he once was. And I think that's reflected in his 80 rating here. But I think he is kind of a buyer beware type of free agent because of the availability. A guy that has teased retirement. We'll have to monitor kind of where his career goes from here. And I don't think it's out of the possibility, too, for the Chargers to bring him back because I do think he likes being in LA and being on this team. But that is kind of why San Francisco is such a ideal fit. He could get an apartment up the highway, go live with Joey for the season, and then come back to LA in the off season. But yeah, let's move on. We've got Troy Dye, who really stepped in nicely at linebacker, man. And it's not like we've ever talked about a 28-year-old athletic mid-round linebacker in the 5th year of his career starting to figure things out. But they needed something from him because of all the injuries at linebacker, and he ends up carving out a really nice role, just finding his way to the football, 21 defensive stops, a pretty secure tackler at just 6.5% missed tackled. That's definitely above average for linebackers. So just a nice player that showed some good stuff on 355 snaps. So he's going 62 to a 68. And probably going to be just a really nice, and he was just here on a cheap deal. He might be hitting free agency, but I think they probably would want to get him back as a good linebacker depth piece and a special teamer. But man, Diane Henley, we frankly probably should have started with this conversation at linebacker with Diane Henley, who I think really came into his own here in the second half of year 2. He gets a plus 3 rating, 70 to a 73. Wasn't all perfect. There was some missed tackles in there, 12.1 missed tackle percentage. Again, that's double of what Troy Dye did. So there were some sloppier moments in terms of run defense, but he is just a heat-seeking missile. He's just an instinctive player in both phases. I think there is a lot of good run defense tape for him, but also ends up with 6 pass breakups and an interception. This is a former wide receiver with 4.54 speed that just understands the coverage aspect of the position. So I look at these two guys, plus hopefully getting Junior Colson healthier next year. You go Henley and Colson being more of the bigger bodied smasher. Henley, a guy that can defend the run, but gives you a little bit more coverage instincts. And then Troy Dye as a backup. That plays for me. I don't think you need to really worry about the linebacker room as long as you feel okay about Junior Colson's health. But then let's talk about the secondary. Tarheeb still just a total breakout in the second half of the season and really starting around week 6. So we would have done the midseason episode at about week 8 or so. So when I did that episode, I see, okay, 5th round pick, Tarheeb still starting to get on the field, a couple good games. We didn't change his rating. It was down there to 67. But it turns out those weren't flashes in the pan. He basically grabs that starting job and doesn't look back the rest of the season. He ends up with 4 picks, 4 pass breakups, a reception percentage allowed of 65%, which is pretty solid for a zone-heavy team. Really good in run defense. Just looked the part of a starting corner in the league. He's 6'1", he's 196. I don't think he's a bad athlete. Just wasn't a hyper-productive player at Maryland that maybe fell through the cracks and went a couple rounds later than he should have. So just really a good pick for the Chargers. A ton of credit to their scouting department. Probably a guy that they benefited from Harbaugh going against still in the Big Ten and was familiar with his tape and was like, yeah, this guy's better than a 5th round pick. And that can be a good benefit of bringing a college guy in. So just good on them for capitalizing on that. And then Cam Hart, who was taken 3 picks later, they just kind of threw a couple darts here and both of them frankly kind of hit. Now, this isn't quite to the degree of Tarheeb still where heading into next year. I feel good about him as a starting level corner. I think Cam Hart still had a couple games in there where you could see the stiffness that maybe a guy like Still doesn't quite have, not quite as fast from Cam Hart. So the margin for error for him, especially from a rookie corner, it's going to be more narrow, but definitely had a lot of good games in there too. He ends the season with 6 pass breakups on the season. This is a guy we praised mid-season. So he gets a +3 ratings boost on the year. He's up to a 71 now, which puts him heading into next year, I think, is a very solid, backup option. I don't think you want to roll into the next year with Hart and Still as your outside corners. They might be able to get away with it because, they're young and can always get better. But Hart, if nothing else, as a solid, because these guys get hurt. Every corner, for the most part, is going to miss 3 or 4 games. So to have a guy like Cam Hart that can play outside and not look lost, and yeah, sometimes you can take advantage of his athleticism. I don't think it's a coincidence that his worst game came against Cleveland and Jerry Jeudy, who can just move at a level that Cam Hart can't quite match. But yeah, nice rookie season for the 5th rounder out of Notre Dame. And then Derwin James, man, I look bad for lowering him at mid-season. Really felt like just kind of a continuation of this on Derwin James, where it's like he's still good, but he's not that big of an impact coverage player and just kind of needs to come down for where we once rated him. But what happened here is the first 3 weeks of the year, they actually had him playing a decent amount of free safety. You see 33 snaps week 1, 26 snaps week 2, 22 the week after that, even up to week 7, 25 snaps at free safety. There was one consistent theme in these games. Elijah Molden wasn't playing that much. And once they really implemented a 3 safety defense with Elijah Molden out there the majority of the time, that's when they were able to do exactly what I was hoping for when I put Derwin James on my breakout players list, play him in the Kyle Hamilton role in this Mike McDonald style defense. And really from about week 8 onward, they were able to do that consistently. And boy, was it pretty, man. For the first time, I feel like in 3 years, we got to feel that superstar impact from Derwin James, who in his prime was one of my favorite players in the league. I think he's on my Twitter banner because I just love him so much. I own a jersey. I'm a big Derwin James fan and just so happy to see him back to that level where he gets 6 sacks on the season. He has the most defensive stops that he's had in his career since his rookie season, 36 defensive stops. Just being that enforcer, playing more in the slot, in the box, getting the man up on tight ends, doing what he does well. It's so good to know that this is still in there. Now, the ball production, the coverage ability, I still don't think is quite what it once was when he was young and there was clips of him going man-to-man against Keenan Allen in rookie camp and all this stuff, or at least year 2. I think they had some Hard Knocks stuff. But, he was like a dominant coverage safety early on. 3 pass breakups, 1 interception, allows 458 yards on the season, reception percentage allowed of 76%. I wouldn't say he's a special coverage player, but not a liability or anything like that. So I do think the 86 rating is a good one. Getting those 2 ratings back from where he started the season, really. And again, that was mostly built off of what he did earlier in his career, not necessarily where he's been at the last couple of years. But I do think there's room to go up. He's 28 and a half years old. He'll play at 29 years old next season. But still, I think somewhat in his prime, could kind of cement his legacy in a system fit that just always was a dream fit for him. And then the aforementioned Elijah Molden. How useful was he, man? Just the ball skills on the back end. Steady player. He's not a superstar. There's a reason he got $6 million a year, which is the equivalent of what Theo Jackson got, who hasn't really played for the Vikings. He's not a imposing player on the field. He's not super fast. He's not particularly big, but he's heady. He's a consistent tackler. He's in the right place. He's the type of player that you can keep on your roster at a kind of cheaper price point and use in these 3 safety packages that I don't think are going anywhere for the Chargers. Really good to see them steal value really left and right. It's something we praised Denver for, but we've certainly praised the Chargers for from this season. And getting Molden for nothing from Tennessee was a great deal. All right, let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs, and there's actually a decent amount of red on the screen here. Not all red, but we're going to have some, turning point conversations about the Kansas City Chiefs and where they're at here. But we'll start on a positive note here with Xavier Worthy, our third straight rookie cracking super stud for these AFC West teams. But I definitely think Worthy is worthy of the boost. Sorry, I had to do it here for what he put up in the second half of the season. The first half of the year, he was getting some receptions. He had the week one, jet sweep or, reverse play where he shows off the speed. We knew he was fast, right? But it just, not really coming down with tough catches. And he was 1 for 9 on contested catch looks in the first half of the season. Not really threatening vertically down the field. There was a busted coverage touchdown in there. I think, that was the Chargers game week 4, but it was just he didn't really beat anybody. It was just a busted coverage, and he caught the ball deep. Good on him. So he had some production, but it was I don't know that the film necessarily shows a reason to upgrade Xavier Worthy from the fact that he's just fast. But the second half of the year, I think, did show us that. I think he started to do a lot more wide receiver stuff, winning on corner routes and just winning tougher catches down the field. The big one is the Super Bowl touchdown when the game was out of hand. It's a tough one. He deserves credit for it. There was nothing about that play that can't be replicated. The game was out of hand at that point, right? But that was the best play of his season, was that Super Bowl touchdown late in the game. That's exactly what they were hoping to get more out of from Xavier Worthy. And I think it's just kind of good to see that kind of as the season's ending, you head into next year and you're like, maybe we should try that a little bit more. See if Xavier Worthy can split quarters coverage and let Mahomes just send it. Because, boy, that was one of the more pretty plays of the year. So it's good to know that's in there. I do wish we saw more of that from Worthy. But you think about, the catch against the Bills where he goes up and over a defender in a big moment, on the right sideline. It was, I don't even remember the distance or the circumstance or anything, but I remember him kind of mossing a defender. You see him winning some of those tougher catches, and again, just being a more present actual wide receiver. And especially when you factor in the fact that he figured things out in the playoffs. He was sitting at 660 yards on the season for the regular season, which just wasn't very much for a guy that had a lot of opportunities to potentially lead this team in targets, but after 3 playoff games, he almost has 1,000 yards on the season. He has, 45 against Houston, 85 against the Bills, and 157 against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. His 2 best games of the year by far were the last 2 games. So he definitely deserves some credit. And, they brought Hollywood Brown back. So you've got now him healthy and actually kind of on the team. Whatever he did late in the season was whatever. But you got your 2 speedsters, and maybe they can revisit this idea now of they wanted to seemingly open things back up with this offense, but it really wasn't until late in the year where Worthy allowed them to do that, and obviously Hollywood Brown just wasn't really around. But yeah, we're gonna have some negative conversations here. Now, I am curious to hear what people think about this. I am going to lower Patrick Mahomes out of the 99 club. Now, he's still my highest rated quarterback at a 96, but I've talked about this. Where that gap between Mahomes and the other 3 elite quarterbacks, I think it has shrunk. The idea that it is Tier 1A, Patrick Mahomes, Tier 1B, Lamar, Allen, Burrow, in whatever order you want to put those guys, I think that idea has sailed. Mahomes for the last 2 years, obviously he's had clutch performances in the playoffs, but now that we've seen a bad Super Bowl performance from him, that idea feels further and further away, that he's just invincible and is always going to find a way to win no matter what. He showed he is human at times, at least. And that was really the only thing you had to attach to from Patrick Mahomes over guys like Josh Allen and Lamar, who just simply have been better quarterbacks over the last 2 years. Not just the production, which just clearly speaks for itself. I don't need to rattle off numbers to you guys. You can look them up. It's the Mahomes numbers just aren't that good. It's obviously not to say he's bad, but I think the film too, he has actually just missed a lot of deep throws over the last couple of years that he wasn't missing 2 or 3 years ago. The turnover-worthy plays are up. The big-time throws are down. He just hasn't been at the level of these other quarterbacks the last 2 years. Now, I'd still take him over those other guys. He doesn't quite have the dynamic passing game setup that some of those other guys do have, and you obviously have to acknowledge that. But I think with him at a 96, Allen and Lamar at a 95, and then Burrow behind those guys at a 94 for me, that just feels right for me. And I'm interested in your guys' feedback. I know it stings to see Mahomes -3. Part of it is he hasn't quite been 99 overall Mahomes that he was maybe 2 years ago when he won the MVP. And part of it is I just think having that tightness between those three guys feels right to me. But also going down is Isaiah Pacheco. Now, I know he played banged up this year, so take this with a grain of salt. One of these players heading into his 4th year, contract year, an opportunity to make some money and get healthy. Still at an 80 rating here, so he's going down 82 to an 80. An opportunity for us to hopefully get a better look at him healthy and really get a better sense for where to rate Pacheco, because I'm not ready to just give up on him yet, but it was not a good season, man. Injury or not. The craziest thing for me on him is he had just 4 missed tackles forced on 83 attempts. Like, we were dinging Javonte Williams for being at a 16% there. That's less than 5% on Isaiah Pacheco. So just not really creating anything, breaking tackles. Is a guy that has shown good contact balance in the past and just not this season. No dynamism as well. He has just one run this season over 15 yards. That was kind of some of the juice that Pacheco was supposed to bring to the table. And when he came back, I was excited to kind of get a little bit more explosive options in this offense, even if it comes through the run game. But for a team that has such great run blocking and a guy that is set up to break tackles at the second level and show some of that speed to break away a little bit more, just wasn't there. So a -2 for Pacheco, and we will definitely see what he looks like next year. He's going to be one of these guys that we're heavily focused on, acknowledging that he just did not play even up to that 80 rating this season. That's more of a reflection of him being hurt this year and what he's done in the past. But then DeAndre Hopkins, a -5. He's 33 years old. He can still play, but as the season went on, it just looked like the burden of playing in the NFL was starting to catch up with him. He's just got bad drops down the stretch, stopped separating, stopped producing for this team. He was pretty good when he first got here, maybe rejuvenated, getting out of Tennessee. But that tapered off really quite quickly. Still an 82 rating, still caught 52% of his 19 contested catch looks. Had some good moments, still a smart player, and it is tough. We saw this with like Amari Cooper. It is tough, even if it is the Chiefs, it is tough to uproot yourself, go to another situation, and just become a dominant player right away. So I do still think as a 1 of 3 and just a smart physical wide receiver, he can still be a player and maybe even make sense to come back to Kansas City here, but he's probably not going to cost that much, and maybe it would be good for him because it's not like he was the reason they lost the Super Bowl, but he had that big 3rd down drop when the Chiefs were like in desperation mode. And at that point, it was like, yeah, this game's definitely over. And it was a pretty bad drop. Definitely a ball that DeAndre Hopkins usually would catch. So a -5 for Hopkins and then a -6 for Travis Kelce. And put him on the list with Isaiah Pacheco, where I don't know that this is the right rating for Travis Kelce right now at an 88 now. He just simply looks washed to me, and it wasn't just the Super Bowl game, but that game was really eye-opening. Just unable to really pull away from anybody in terms of his route running. And, he's a guy that's won with savvy and the awareness after the catch to find those soft spots and zones and stuff. But it just feels like it's reached another level where he's just so doesn't have the movement skills anymore that it's weighing on his overall game. Still consistent hands, still a good contested catch target. But the other crazy thing on Kelce, other than just the lack of separation, is the lack of after the catch ability. Even the last 2-3 years, that's been a big part of Travis's game because he does get a lot of these short to intermediate targets. But he drops off the last 3 seasons, starting with 2023, moving backwards, 17 missed tackles forced and 5 yards after the catch. 24 missed tackles forced in 2022 with 6 yards after the catch. And then 19 missed tackles forced with 6.2 yards after the catch in 2021. This year, on similar numbers of receptions, right? Almost the same in that 90 to 105 range in terms of total receptions. 3 missed tackles forced and just 3.5 yards after the catch. So that especially tells you the dynamism just isn't there. And again, it wasn't just that Super Bowl game. It was, to me, something that was evident all season long. I'm frankly surprised that he didn't retire, because I feel like for him, he can't play like he used to. And if I'm the Chiefs, I'm frankly ready, especially if you're trying to kind of turn a corner and kind of get this next group of guys going. And I honestly, as we've been talking today, talking about like maybe bringing DeAndre Hopkins back, I completely forgot about Rashee Rice getting back into the mix next year. But, you know, if you talk about next year, maybe turning a corner with Worthy and Brown and Rashee Rice, like I don't know that I necessarily want the gravity of Travis Kelce and all this. Like, I don't know. I'm curious, Chiefs fans, like when Kelce said he's coming back, were you happy about it? I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below on that one. But that's the majority of our negative conversations. It's not all bad for this team that did go to the Super Bowl. On the offensive line, Creed Humphrey deserves some love. I think he has cemented himself officially as the best center in football. Not to disrespect Frank Ragnow, he's also awesome, but I think Ragnow's kind of sustained a very high level of play where Creed Humphrey just frankly keeps getting better. He finishes with the number one pass blocking efficiency for all centers in football. And not to just puke up PFF grades, but above a 90, you guys have heard me talk about, you get into that 90 territory, you're doing something special. Above a 90 grade in both pass blocking and run blocking, a total grade of 92.8. That's his third elite graded season in his 4-year career. Just a special player. Fuck you, Brian Gutekunst. George Karlaftis, as we switch over to the defense, really a nice year, a +1 from a 79 to an 80. Kind of a similar conversation about Zach Allen, frankly, where it's like, you look back on it, and he ends up, if you include playoffs, he ends up 5th in all of edge rushers in pressures. He ends up with 12 sacks on the season. Really good numbers, but at the same time, he led all edge rushers in snaps. And he ends up with a pass rush win rate tied for 63rd in the league. So I think that context is important when we're talking about really just who George Karlaftis is as a player. I think he is a phenomenal number 2, works perfectly well with Chris Jones as a number 1 in this group. But just to point out, like, he had crazy production. A big part of that is just how much he plays. But, I mean, he did have some really exciting kind of pass rush wins, showing off just like he has a big tool belt of moves and he can break them out. And I think he's getting a little bit more efficient with them steadily throughout the years. So into the 80s now for George Karlaftis, which for a late first round pick to find a really good number 2 edge rusher, that's a slam dunk pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. Another guy that is going to be coming up on a payday somewhat soon. It's the one downside to being going to 3 Super Bowls in as many years and drafting super well is these guys just don't come cheap. But also on the defensive line, Tershawn Wharton had an awesome contract year season, and he's been kind of a nice, undersized pass rushing specialist type for them. But a career year for him in terms of pressures and sacks, and I think he earned himself some pretty good money kind of coming back to Kansas City on a 1-year prove-it deal, and proved it that he deserves to get paid. So we'll see if it's Kansas City that kind of values him, or if another team wants to bring him in as their 3rd or 4th piece for their D-line. There's all these teams, Cincinnati, Chicago. There's so many teams that could use a guy that can just come in, cause some problems at 6'1", 280 with his athleticism. Coming out of Missouri, S&T, by the way. It's the first Wharton put that school on the map. I'll say that. But gonna be a fun name to track in what is a very poor interior defensive line market. And then Nick Bolton, who did just get a contract extension today. That was actually very surprising to me, if I'm being honest. The Chiefs certainly aren't swimming in cap space. And they have Leo Chenal, right, who we can kind of lump into this conversation. To me, it was perfectly logical for Bolton, who's a great run defender and an okay coverage player, to just let him go. I don't think he had an incredible season. He started to miss a lot of tackles down the stretch, and I don't think you really felt Nick Bolton's presence. He had that big injury a couple years ago, and I don't know. I don't feel like he's been quite back to what he was in like his second season. I really felt like they were going to be able to capitalize on the fact that they nailed the Leo Chenal pick in the 3rd round and hand Chenal the full-time middle linebacker duties, or at least, starting linebacker duties next to Drew Tranquill. Bills fans damn near crucified me when I didn't know who wore the green dot for their helmet, so I don't actually know. I think Bolton probably wears the green dot for them, but for me, it just made sense, man. You let Bolton go, you get another comp pick, you plug in Chenal, let him break out, and then give Chenal the money. I mean, I'm fine with them bringing Bolton back, and he's obviously going down 1. Like, it is what it is. I just think he missed more tackles, deserved his rating to go down a little bit. He's still a really good player. But for me, if that's risking losing Leo Chenal, that's not worth it. And frankly, I think the upside of playing Leo Chenal with his athleticism and his upside is just better. So I actually don't love that for the Chiefs because I just love Leo Chenal. I wanted to shout him out. He continued to just bring elite run defense in his role to the Chiefs. For me, with a 76 rating on Chenal, I just don't know how much higher you can put that until he gets a full-time role, because we know what he does extremely well, and he's rated properly for that. But he hasn't really had that opportunity to do more coverage drops and do more of the true reads from a middle linebacker position. I think he can handle it, but that's why his rating's not going up. I'm frankly a little bit disappointed that they brought Nick Bolton back, but I'm sure Chiefs fans are happy to have him back. He's a fun player. But let's go to the secondary. Shamari Connor had a nice year, especially as a run defender. Kind of plays some safety, plays some slot corner. They just kind of move him all over the place. And he's just a heat-seeking missile, boomer bust coverage player. I don't have too many positive things to say about him in that regard for one way or another, but does deserve some love for his pursuit and tackling skills. So +1 for Connor, up to a 74. Wouldn't be surprised if they insert him as the starting safety now with Justin Reed set for free agency. Reed had a really good year. I do think he really had a nice year in run defense, getting down dirty around the line of scrimmage. But this is a guy that has battled with a lot of missed tackles throughout his career. It's a big reason Houston ultimately left. And his first year in Kansas City as well, he was up there at a 15% missed tackle rate. But he's cleaned it up the last couple of years, and he only missed 8 tackles this year. Really impressive for a guy that played 1,000 snaps. And he is a pending free agent, so definitely someone that could get a half-decent contract at 28 years old. Like, he's hitting it at a good time, so wouldn't be surprised if he gets a pretty lofty deal. And I don't know that Kansas City can necessarily afford that, but I do think Shamari Connor, very similar kind of physical profile and skill set, should be able to step into that safety role no problem and see some rating boost next year. And then they have 2 other safeties that have played really well too. Brian Cook, as a tackler and a run defender, is really effing good at it. That's what he was at Cincinnati. Frankly, not a very good coverage player. I'm just not the biggest Brian Cook fan. I just don't think he has like great instincts as a coverage player, and he's slower. So there's actually a lot of moments where he's not missing tackles and he's getting to the ball, but it's in a situation where another safety might have been able to be there to actually make a play on the football. So I think he's okay. But then Jaden Hicks as well, 4th round pick out of Washington State. I mean, a lot of people really liked Jaden Hicks in the draft. I think some of my friends in the draft Twitter complex had like 2nd round grades on him. I think I kind of split the difference as with a 3rd round grade between where he went and where some of the hype was on him, but definitely like a heavy hitting, kind of heat seeking missile, bigger safety. To get him in the 4th round was definitely a value. And he showed that. He had 3 interceptions this year. He was popping dudes, whether it was in coverage or in the run game. And I think with how he played and how Shamari Connor looks, they're very comfortable letting Justin Reed go and still having kind of this bounty of different body types and safeties to move around for Steve Spagnuolo. So he rounds out our conversation on the Chiefs. And then let's finish things up with the Las Vegas Raiders. I apologize, Raiders fans. I kind of glossed over the Raiders side of things on the Geno Smith trade. So I do want to take just a second to talk about that here, because that episode of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast was just yesterday. And let's just have a quick convo about Geno, even if it doesn't fully apply to what we're trying to accomplish here. The reason I didn't really mention Geno is I don't have too many big takes about it, other than I just love the move for the Raiders. They were obviously in a bad spot quarterback-wise. What I really didn't want to see for them was to take Shedeur Sanders at 6. Maybe it could work, but I just don't. I would much rather them go get more elite talent, because that's what they really need. And if nothing else, going to get Geno Smith means no Shedeur, I think. I mean, maybe you still take him as a developmental guy, but I just don't think that's the direction they want to go with Pete Carroll there. So to me, that's one big positive. But I mean, he's probably the best quarterback they were going to have an option of getting, outside of maybe going the Aaron Rodgers route, depending on, you could debate Geno and Aaron Rodgers, I think, but I think Geno has a case to be better than Aaron Rodgers as well. But to give a third-round pick for him, you're going to have to pay him, which I think it makes more sense for the Raiders to pay him than it does for Seattle, because Seattle, I think, has been trying to kind of keep their eyes open already in previous seasons for other quarterbacks, whereas the Raiders can now basically put themselves in the Seahawks position, which is ironic with Pete Carroll as their head coach. But you bring in Geno, feel like you have good starting quarterback play. I do think Geno is a tier 3 quarterback, a good player, an underrated player even, that has had some tough asks having to play behind that interior offensive line in Seattle. So you bring him in and give him a better offensive line, and now you can kind of keep your eyes peeled. Again, maybe that's Shedeur at number 6. I don't know. Maybe it's a second-round pick on a Jackson Dart or something like that. I don't know. But it gives you more flexibility to find that QB of the future, and I think this team can compete and be fun to watch with Geno, and they can be in that mix for the wild card teams in the AFC. It's a tough battle, but that's the direction they're going. When they signed Pete Carroll, it was like, this is not a full-on tank. This is a competitive rebuild type of situation, which is always a narrow line to try to thread. It always is. They tried to do it with Gardner Minshew last year. We saw how that went. I mean, trying to do that with Geno Smith is just a much more rational approach to it. So I like it. But let's talk studs and duds here. So we round out the quadruple 4 in a row, if you will, of outstanding rookies in this division who earn the super stud title for these teams. Brock Bowers, who, I mean, man, what a freaking season. I mean, he was our midseason super stud as well, and just kind of retweet on everything I said. He just continued to do it down the stretch. He gets another 3 ratings boost, an 87 rating for a rookie coming out of his first season, plus 9 on the season. We already love Brock Bowers coming in, but just a best case scenario, man. He's just an absolutely dominant player. He gets voted first team All-Pro. I voiced my opinion. My vote would have been for Kittle, just because I think he's more of a true tight end and had a phenomenal season and didn't have the target share of someone like Brock Bowers. And Bowers is a run blocker. It's just not his game. He's only 240 pounds. So that is what it is. But second team All-Pro, I'm totally fine with it. And even just getting first team All-Pro and having some fun with it and just giving him his credit for what a freaking amazing season he had. I get it, I suppose. But I'll reiterate this point on him. The player he actually reminds me the most of is Cooper Kupp. Now, he the crazy thing is, he's such a great athlete that I actually think athletically comparing him to Cooper Kupp isn't crazy. But Brock Bowers moves like him and is as fast as Cooper Kupp at 240 pounds. But in terms of where they win as that big slot, but someone that can actually step outside, play outside wide receiver, which they did a bunch with Bowers. They would line him up as an outside wide receiver and just throw a back shoulder to him, and he would win it. He really is a wide receiver that can play tight end. And Cooper Kupp, honestly, is the same way with how good of a run blocker he is and all that. I really see the comp on that, and obviously Cooper Kupp was a Triple Crown winner, and it's just I don't have a bad word to say here. He's incredible after the catch. What a pick, what a superstar, deserves his love, and there wasn't really a great option otherwise to give a super stud to for the Raiders. It's a lot more steady increments for these guys as we go, whereas Brock Bowers, it was just a continuation of dominance. But Amir Abdullah, hey, 31 years old, had a career year. Man, he was making some catches this year. I can't remember who it was against, but there was a play, Aiden O'Connell on like a 3rd and 18. He gets flushed from the pocket, and he just chucks it down the field, and the receiver wins like this incredible catch. And I assumed it was, maybe not Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers or Jacoby Myers. And it's Amir Abdullah wearing his, number 8, gets out of the pile. And I'm like, oh my God, what a catch for a running back. But he was super steady. He was their best back. He was efficient as a runner for what they had to work with there. But man, he's stuck around and has really carved out a role as, frankly, one of the better just true 3rd down backs in the league. And that puts them in a good spot. I mean, one player, by the way, that would just be a perfect compliment to him, Damian Martinez. Now, I don't think they have... Well, I guess they do have their 3rd round pick still, right? Because they used the one they got from Devontae Adams to go get Geno. So, 3rd round pick, Damian Martinez. You take a big bruiser, you pair him with Amir Abdullah. That'd be a great running back duo. And holy crap, I'm going through this and realizing I didn't take a look at Sincere McCormick. So I'm already short on time here. I'm just going to be a little open about this process here. I don't have time to go in and take a look at his rating and give you that and all that. But McCormick did get out there late. I liked McCormick. I was surprised he went undrafted. He's a small contact balance back out of, was he UTEP, UNLV, UTSA, one of those Texas schools. But I guess UNLV, that's disrespectful. That's in Las Vegas. But anyway, I'm not going to show you the McCormick rating, but I would put him at about a 70. I think he showed some of that contact balance style stuff at 5'9", 205. Probably not enough to earn the starting role next year. They're probably going to bring in someone else. But if they don't, we know how backs can produce in this league. So got to give McCormick some love. I apologize that I overlooked that at first. But let's talk about some more of these playmakers. Michael Mayer, disappointing, weird season. I get kind of a touchy subject because he's just battled with stuff all the way down to I think he has mental health stuff. So I don't want to bang on the guy, but there's just no production here this year, man. Does get on the field kind of later in the year. He missed basically the entire first half of the season and just really nothing to write home about, man. Obviously you got Bowers coming in, but there was a room for Mayer to really still be a starter here because I mean seriously, Brock Bowers plays, I'm gonna check it right now while we're talking, but he probably plays 70% of his snaps out wide. Yeah, so he had I'm just eyeballing this, but 560 snaps as a receiver and 370 snaps as a tight end. So you're talking about 60% more or less as a receiver. That's, another 60% of those snaps where you need an actual tight end out there, presumably. I really thought there was room for these guys to coexist. And, they kind of tried it, and he just wasn't efficient. Didn't look good. Wasn't winning tough catches. Not bringing much after the catch. Just a rough season for him. I'm pulling for him. I thought he was a really good prospect. I think it's in there. He's got to get things straight. And if he's dealing with mental health, I don't want to diminish that. It's a real deal. I hope that he can find the right support and treatment to really get on top of it, because I do think he can be a quality starter in the league. Had to lower him, unfortunately, 76 to a 74. But then we got Jacoby Myers, career year for Myers. Dude, I just, you got to respect the guy. He is not a great athlete by any sense of the imagination, but he came into the league undrafted. And, he's crafty and smart and all that. He's got a former quarterback background, so he's good at kind of finding soft spots in zones and being friendly for the quarterback. But just how tough as shit this guy is as at the catch point and how consistent of hands he has. He has 126 targets this year. You want to guess how many drops? I'll give you a second. If you guessed 0, you were correct. He had 0 credited drops per PFF on 126 targets. That's just absurd consistency. And he's always been a tough contested catch winner. He's a 62% contested catch guy on his career. That only went up, going 66.7% on 24 contested catch targets. And the other thing about Myers is after they got rid of Devontae Adams, and even when Adams was there, he played a lot outside. I mean, he is typically a slot guy, But he is 6'2", 200 pounds. Like, he has the size to go outside. He's not going to really run by anybody, but he can win back shoulders and tough catches. But he actually played 590 snaps as an outside wide receiver versus 300 as a slot guy. So it's not even really fair to lump him in as a slot wide receiver. He really can do everything, and kind of like a poor man's Keenan Allen at this point with what he's doing for the Raiders. So he's just awesome and is going to be heading into the final year of that 3-year deal. Wouldn't be surprised at 28 years old if he says, hey, you guys should probably reward me for what I did. And he could be a guy that gets this, 18, 19, $20 million. I still think his athletic ceiling might keep him out of the 20 APY, but if he gets it, wouldn't be the biggest surprise. And I wouldn't really, knock them for that either. He's just been really, really good. Maybe he was a super stud candidate after we talked through everything, but DJ Glaze, their rookie right tackle, a pat on the back moment for myself here. I liked DJ Glaze. It was very low in a lot of those consensus rankings, but I think I had a 4th round grade on him, which was much higher than consensus. The Raiders actually spent a late 3rd on him, but a very steady season for a 3rd round tackle. Ends up starting 15 games for them. And just a solid contributor in both phases. He had some ups and downs. The Miami game certainly wasn't the best. The Bengals game, he had some lumps mid-season for sure. Those both came week 9, week 11. But he settled back in the rest of the year. And he put his athleticism to the test as a run blocker as well. Just a very fluid athlete. I thought he was pretty solid in his technique. So he, to me, I think they could potentially just look at this and say, we're going to give him a year at right tackle. And as we talk about the rest of this offensive line, I mean, Gino's got to be looking at this like, this will work for me compared to what I had in Seattle. And if DJ Glaze is my worst piece when I have a franchise left tackle and multiple interior guys that you feel good about, maybe as many as 4 of them, like as we'll talk about here, there's potentially 4 interior offensive linemen that would be the best in Seattle. But if DJ Glaze as your right tackle, where Gino's really good at sensing that pressure off of that side, is their worst piece, he can manage that. And even in Seattle, 2/3 of the season and in 2023, they had the worst right tackle play in the league. It just completely derailed their season. So it's a massive upgrade for Gino from what he had there, even if he doesn't develop. And that's a pretty big if. Like, I think development is certainly expected for DJ Glaze. So he gets a +4 on the season for what he did. And then moving inside, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who I actually lowered earlier in the season because there was big expectations on him. And he came in and had his struggles early, but I think he really settled down and actually really finished strong, playing a little bit of guard, a little bit of center. Never really easy to ask a rookie to handle both of those things. And he played right guard a little bit week 3 as well. But played pretty close to even splits between left guard and center. So they're going to have some flexibility to sort through this group. I think he looked like equal parts at guard and center. He's a very balanced size, 6'3", 320. Like, he can do both. But the run blocking flashes absolutely showed down the stretch and just got way more comfortable in pass protection. But, like, you go through week 12 on, pressures allowed, 1, 2, 1, 2, 0, 1. Very, 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 very steady. So you're definitely feeling good about him, where they drafted him, what he was as a prospect, him settling down, and the flexibility to be either a guard or a center as they kind of put this whole thing together. And then Dylan Parham was really steady as well. Much better as a run blocker, I think, than a pass blocker, which isn't a surprise. Depending where you look, you can see him listed as low as 285. He just is a smaller player, but he's technically sound. He's tough as shit. He's a good athlete. So he gets a +1 up to a 76. And then Jordan Meredith, kind of the breakout player in the second half of the season. He ends up playing 574 snaps for this team. PFF grade of 80.8, 75.7 as a pass blocker, 78.5 as a run blocker. This is an undrafted pickup out of Western Kentucky from 2021. He had played just 134 snaps in his 3 prior seasons. So just completely out of nowhere. But athletic dude, seems to have figured things out, was waiting on an opportunity and absolutely made the most of it. They slapped a restricted free agent tender on him, and I haven't heard too much noise on that front. Probably can get him back on that tender, and you've got 3 guys there, and then you do still have Andre James. I'm going to lower him. He had his career year in 2023, and you just look at the efficiency. It just wasn't quite there. So basically just a U-turn on some of the gains he made in 2023, but he's still not a bad player. I think he's still a good pass protector, and I would still want him on the team. He's under contract the next 2 years. You know, they gave him a 3-year, $24 million contract before this year. There's really no reason to, I think, just cut him. Because, with how the guard market and center market has exploded, that's pretty good value, even for like a swing guy on the inside. He's never really played guard, but he is listed at 6'4", 300. I think he could theoretically do it. I don't know. We'll kind of see where they go with him. If they released him based on how the season kind of played out, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Again, I think the value is there to keep him as a backup, but he battled injuries this year. Efficiency was down. The ratings coming down, and it kind of feels like they don't really have a great starting spot for him, because I think they probably want to start Meredith with how good he looked down the stretch. So we'll see what they end up doing there, but. We will flip now over to this Raiders defense. Hey, good on them for getting Patrick Graham back. I'm a big fan of Patrick Graham. I think these defensive players are really excited that he decided to come back after they kind of just didn't renew his contract. But Tyree Wilson, their year 2, 6th overall pick, almost like a Quentin Johnston situation with this conversation where it's like, well, yeah, he's not as good as you drafted him to be, but he's doing some stuff for this team. They found a spot for him, really very much in the role that Patrick Graham had a lot of success putting Leonard Williams at when he was with the Giants, as a hybrid end, play some edge, play some 3-tech, and just be kind of a thumper as a shade of the guard and inside shade of the tackle. And that role worked for him. And then once he started to kind of show that he has something in the tank, as the season went on later, his snap count went up, and he started to get even more reps as an edge. And, I think there's still room to believe that he can keep getting better and be an impact for this team. He's going to be here for a while, right? That high first-round pick, there's not a whole lot you can really do to move off of that. But he ends up with 37 pressures on 348 pass rush snaps, so he clears that 10% pressure threshold that's like your starting point that you want to see. Now, it was a lot of stunts and manufactured stuff, a lot of unblocked and loops and stuff, so not necessarily where you want in terms of pass rush win rate. He was 61st in pass rush win rate, ironically right above Trayvon Walker. I'll leave it there, but still had some wins in there. And then what he did as a run defender, I think, was really promising. I think his athleticism from that shade does show to kind of split gaps and get on top of blockers and backs in a hurry. So +2 for him, up to a 73, a usable, playable player. And then on the edge as well, Kaylavon Chason, a +4. Really a nice kind of breakout for the former first-round pick. Jags fans are throwing up their hands like, really? You couldn't have done this in the 4 years you spent with us? He was kind of there, Tyree Wilson, for a while. But his tape was legit good, dude. He was breaking out a cross chop, showing some bull rush. He ends up with 29 pressures on 300 snaps, 6 sacks, PFF pass rush grade of 74.7. This is essentially, to me, like a copy and paste story of Arden Key. Now, Chason ended up getting drafted higher than Arden Key, but both of these guys were like those like 5-star prospects that went to LSU, fed with a silver spoon, and just were like raw coming out. And Arden Key, ironically, drafted by the Raiders, obviously a very different regime, but Arden Key goes to San Francisco in his 4th year. Now, this is Chason's 5th year, I'm pretty sure. But Key goes to the Raiders and kind of breaks out in his 4th year. And this just reminds me of it. And it's not like Arden Key is like now this superstar, but he's a really good, like, usable number 2 rusher, worst case number 3. We need to see more of this from Chason before we're all the way there. But I do think the ways he was winning with his athletic profile are repeatable. So he's going to be an interesting free agent to monitor. I had him as a target for a team like Detroit or Atlanta, who needs a little bit of extra juice off the edge that could come a little bit cheaper. And I think the Raiders might be interested in bringing him back too, but they're probably talking to Malcolm Kuntz too, who's kind of in a similar profile. But then you got Charles Snowden as well, lengthy early down edge defender, doing some good stuff in run defense this season. He's gone up 7 on the year because he was all the way down there in the low 60s, but he's up to a 69. He's a good kind of fourth edge to have. His length profile does present some problems. I would like to see the Raiders bring him back because he's a good fit with what Patrick Graham's got going on with his multiple fronts. You can use him in a couple different ways. He actually played some like off-ball linebacker going back to his days in Virginia Tech. So he's just got a lot of different hats he can wear. And then Robert Spillane, a really good season to follow up a really good season. His just heat-seeking a missile ability as a run defender is so good. Just kind of repeating what he did last year, 52 defensive stops last year, 51 this year. And the fun thing about him too, and a big reason he's going up, is he cut his missed tackle percentage down even further. Was at 11% last year and down to 6% this year. So, when he plays as aggressive as he does, and he's, not the lengthiest guy and not the most athletic guy either, but it's impressive to be able to consistently tackle NFL running backs as well as he did. So he's a free agent, probably wants a lot of money at 29 years old, and I think the Raiders are probably going to pay him. I wouldn't be surprised if I get off of this recording and find out they extended him because he's a great fit for what they need. But Trayvon Merrick, on the other hand, I think they might lose him after he had a really good season. Talk about just tackling consistency, heat-seeking missile, being a presence, coming downhill as a safety. That's what I think of with Trayvon Merrick. I don't think of like lockdown coverage ability. He's got speed, he's got range, he can make some plays. But I don't think he's a superstar, but someone's going to pay him because of his draft pedigree, his athleticism, his year-to-year development. It could be the Raiders that bring him back, but definitely a guy that's going to, I think, get more money than even a lot of people realize. Probably something like 3 years, like $48 million, something like that. But +3 for Trayvon Merrick for having his best season on his career in a contract year. And then the Raiders did bring back Isaiah Pola-Mao. They gave him like a 2-year, like $10 million more or less extension, which is like decent money. He's played a lot for them. He's a unique build, 6'4", 205 pounds. He's a good athlete, and he started to kind of get in the mix as a starting safety for them. But then our last guy here, a breakout player for the Raiders this year, Isaiah Pola-Mao, who was rewarded with a cheap 2-year, $10 million deal, kind of bottom of the barrel starting money for him, but someone that is projectable to get better and better. He was undrafted out of USC, 6'4", 205 pounds. He's got speed, and he's had some plays on the ball. Like when he sees it and he triggers, and he had 5 pass breakups on the year, like he can disrupt balls over the middle of the field. He has the range to get to the sideline. Like there's stuff to like about him, but he is definitely still figuring things out in coverage, which is totally fair and understandable. But if he's going to keep getting better, you want to see his processing keep getting better. But as a run defender, he puts that size to good work, comes downhill, will smash you. Really fun player that I do think at this point is going to be on the field quite a bit next year, whether he's a full-time starting safety or as kind of a third rotational safety to just kind of run around and make plays. But definitely someone to be aware of as you're watching the Raiders, because he's a fun guy and has the traits. And even though he went undrafted, I think his upside indicates it's a little more than that. But that is going to do it for the Raiders and your AFC West and studs and duds at large. Thank you, everybody, whether you just watched this episode or you watched all 8 episodes of Studs and Duds. I do think it's a great series that if you're looking for something to watch over the next couple of months and you didn't catch every episode, everything I said, like, yeah, some of these guys might be changing teams in the coming weeks, but everything I said, like, kind of is gonna stay relevant through the offseason, really, because these guys aren't playing any new football. So if you guys do get bored and want to revisit the series, I do appreciate it. I'm pretty sure while we're at the end here, and everybody still listening is probably the loyal Studs and Duds fans at this point, but I'm pretty sure I need to spend some more time thinking about it and collecting feedback from you guys, so I welcome feedback. But I'm pretty sure we're going to take everything we do with Studs and Duds here, video format and all, with the graphics, nothing would change there, and do it on the Fully Inflated Football Podcast YouTube channel, and it would be uploaded as an audio podcast as well. It's just a collection of feedback and thinking about the series and what it does for the channel. It's just been a collection of thinking of what is best for me to continue this series. The series is not going anywhere. It's a core part of my core fans and my channel and what we do. But I would love your feedback. Like, if I put it on the YouTube channel for the Fully Inflated Football Podcast, would that mean you definitely would not watch? Like, I want to hear that from you guys. If you hear that news and you're like, absolutely no, do not do that. But yeah, did want to end with that. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry for putting this out late. It's probably going to be about 10:30 Central when it drops, more or less. But yeah, let's go ahead and get out of here. I will see you guys tomorrow as well for my free agent live stream. Peace out.